of you. I'm again Dr. Prashna Samadar. Today I'll be delivering the topic of immigration law on travel document and relevance of passport in immigration. So as per the prerequisites are concerned, they are the same as the first slide was, because all the major legislations and international instruments are same. So the basic instruments which are required to understand the concept of passport in Indian context are the Indian Constitution, certain articles of Indian Constitution, Passport Act 1920, Citizenship Act, Immigration Expulsion from Assam Act 1950, because it also deals with some of the special permissions while people are allowed to enter into India without having legal travel documents also. And then Immigration Carriers Liability Act 2000 and Passport Amendment Act 2015. So this particular slide deals with these major objectives, like to understand the basic concept of passport, to understand the relevance of having travel documents, because of course passport is something which every one of us know is one of the basic travel documents. When we need to travel from one country to another, we need to have certain travel documents which makes us a legal entrant in a particular country, or whenever we are crossing our border and going to some other foreign country, we need to have those documents so as to we can come back to our country safely. So we need to understand that why we need all of these travel documents, why without all of these documents we can't make a legalized movement from one place to another. Then to realize the contextuality of the legalized movement, because as I have said just in the previous objective, that there is something called legalized movement and there is something called unlegalized or illegalized movement rather. So when we are talking about a particular movement from one place to another place, basically from one country to another country, when we are crossing the borders, then we need to understand that the movement should be legalized, and movement can only be legalized when it is accompanied with legal travel documents. So that is needed to understand that what is the contextuality of legal movement and what can happen in case the movement is not legal in nature prima facie, or while entering into the domain or looking deep into a particular case study, what happens in case the travel is not properly legalized. Then the next objective is to understand the necessity of passport and visa, because from the days when we have gained our consciousness, we might be knowing that there is something called passport and visa. But very commonly people make a mistake. They don't understand what is the thin line difference between passport and visa, or for what purpose passports and visas are used, and or is there any difference at all which is existing between passport and visa. So that is also needed to understand that why passport is given and why visas are issued, and what are the basic objectives because of which these two instruments are issued. Then the next is to understand the positionality of passport in Indian legislation. Of course, we are dealing with India at the end. So we need to understand that how India has interpreted the concept of passport, how many types of passports India allow, or whether at all they have a single passport, or they have multiple passport for multiple purposes, or what kind of visas they have, on what is the legislation or what are those laws. Is there any a single law, or there are multiple laws which is dealing with passport or aspects of it. So that is this objective is dealing with. And lastly, to understand the reference of passport in various related legislations. Of course, as I said that India is having a distinctive legislation called the Passport Act. But except that particular act, is there any other amendment? Is there any other legislation? Is there any other regulation? Any other notification where passport has been dealt with, where passport has been given impetus? So on what context, or how the concept of passport or the relevance of passport has taken place in the Indian legislation? What is the developmental chronology of that? So that is has been dealt in this particular objective. In this particular slide, I have tried to highlight the topics which I have covered in my entire presentation. So they are basically definition of passport, necessity of passport for legalized movement, relevance of passport and visas, positioning of passport in Indian legislative structure, comparative analysis of two vital passports acts in India, because there have been Passport Act 1920 which is still in existence, which has not been repealed by any new act. Generally what happens in the cases of laws, whenever any new law come in place, the old law is repealed. But in this case, it has not been so. So Passport Act 1920 is still in existence. But then what is the basic motto because of which Passport Act 1920 has been kept? But in addition to that, there has been a new law which has taken place. That is Passport Act 1957, which has also been amended in many times. So that is needed to be understood. So whenever we will be able to understand it more clearly if we can compare those two legislations. And lastly, present Indian positionality in terms of allowing certain category of people even without proper travel documents. Even I said this in one of my previous slides, that there are certain conditions, or there are certain contextualities, you can say, when India has allowed people to travel and cross their border either for the purpose of immigrating or for the purpose of emigrating without proper travel documents. So that is also becomes very important to understand, because in normal scenario, all of us know, or all of us understand that without travel documents we cannot cross international border. Then what are the circumstances under which a person may be allowed, or what are those conditions or what are those laws under which a person maybe while fulfilling those conditions or while fulfilling those exceptions can travel without proper travel documents. So firstly, to go with the definition of travel document, the first definition is a generic definition, an identity document issued by a government or international treaty organization to facilitate the movement of individuals or small groups of persons across international boundaries, such as passport. So basically, we need to understand primarily that why travel document is required. Now, this is very common phenomenon that a person will not be expected to be stagnant at one place in one country for his entire life. There can be opportunities, there can be situations, there can be emergencies, there can be incidences where a person is needed to cross the international border. Generally, the concept of travel document comes in place whenever we are crossing international border. If within the domestic border, if within a nation we are traveling, generally we don't take a note of passports and visas and all other related travel documents, if any country specifically have all of that. Although internationally accepted travel documents are passport and visa basically, but if any particular country have any specific provision, they have the right to do so, because all states are sovereign. We know that states are independent to take certain action so as to protect their security, serenity and integrity and all of that. So basically, this is the requirement because a person has to move. You cannot restrict a person that you have taken birth in this place, so you have to be in for your entire life, you have to be in this place, you cannot move from your country to a different country. So that cannot happen. So basically, the government, each and every state government, state under international law means a particular nation. So each and every state government has to ensure that they are providing with certain travel documents to their citizens, to their individuals who are staying within their boundary, so that they can cross the boundaries whenever required and they can move to different country. So there are, of course, there are certain other compliances. There are various other documents which are needed to be attached. Not only passport is sufficient, but passport is, yes, of course, one of the, you can say, cornerstone travel document. Then we have a Serbian Passport Act, which has tried to define what is a travel document. So a travel document is a public document for a citizen of any country for crossing the border, traveling and staying in a foreign country and for the return. So, of course, if a person is going from one country to another country, as we have dealt in our previous slide also, that for a purpose of immigration, there has to have a certain specific objective. Now, when the objective is getting fulfilled, if it is not permanent relocation, rather than if it is other than permanent relocation, then in that case, once the subject is getting fulfilled, then the person has to get back to their own place of stay or origin. So obviously a person has to be so sure that once I'm crossing the border, I can very well come back to my nation safely. So for that reason also, travel document is needed to be sound and legal. Okay, so that is one aspect of, one very important aspect of travel document which has been highlighted by Serbian Passport Act. And our own Passport Act 1967, Indian Passport Act 1967 has also tried to define travel document by saying that it means a document issued or deemed to have been issued under any act. Under any act means to say under any act which is dealing with this subject matter. That is needless to say. So basically it is any document. It has not said that only passport can be a document. In future it can very well happen that passport no longer remains a travel document, and in place of passport some other document takes its place. So it has not tried to circumscribe and compulsorily stuck to passport. It has said that any such document which has been issued to the individuals of that state under any act which is dealing with this subject matter may be considered as travel document if the document has been made only for the purpose of traveling transboundary. So although in my earlier slides I have already delved in a bird's eye view regarding the concept of legalized movement, but here I have tried to define the concept of legalized movement, although I couldn't find a very comprehensive definition of legalized movement in any of the sources I have researched. So whatever knowledge I have gathered in my past 7 years of teaching in international law and immigration law, I can come up with this a small definition of legalized movement. So as per my understanding, it is a sort of human movement from one place to another with a specific purpose which is prima facie seems to be a legal purpose, with requisite travel document required by the concerned nations where the traveling is being targeted from the place of habitual stay. So here if you break down the definition, there are many components which is coming. First of all, it has to be a human movement. Of course, we know that until now animals also have rights, but they don't require travel documents. They don't require passport, they don't require visa. There are certain documents which are required if you are traveling with a pet, but that is not exactly what a human Homo sapien requires. So that is first thing is human movement, that it has to be a human movement. Then for a specific purpose which is prima facie seems to be a legal purpose. Why it has been written, there is a very profound objective behind writing this particular statement, because the concept of legality of a particular subject is very volatile. It's not that something which is not legal in India will not be legal in some other country, and something which is not legal in that country is also illegal in India. So that is not the case. So it is very well understood that law is something which is very versatile. So, but there are certain things which are prima facie illegal, like robbery, like murder, like rape, like sexual harassment. These are all illegal activities, or like trafficking, whether it's human trafficking or it's animal trafficking or drug trafficking, any sort of trafficking. There are most of the nations around the globe consider these kind of activities as illegal activities. So that's why it is written prima facie seems to be legal purpose. So the purpose should not be attached with any sort of illegality which seems to be prima facie illegal. That should not be the basic objective of movement. With requisite travel document, of course, if the travel has to be legal, it has to be backed up with proper travel documents which are legally sanctioned by the authorities. There has to be no faking. There should not be any fraud or misrepresentation by the concerned nations where the traveling is being targeted from the place of habitual stay. As I have said in the previous slide also, that although passport and visas are some of the universal travel documents which has attained the place of universal document as universal travel documents, but at the same time states are independent to take decisions that any time they can change their travel document, or the nature of the travel document may change, or the documentation or the way it has been drafted may change. So basically wherever we are traveling, we need to see what are the requirements of that country, basically. What are the prerequisites of the travel documents that particular nation has, and of course what is my nation demanding from my side, because as I have said in the previous slide also, that after the objective for which I am traveling to a foreign country, I have to get back to my nation. So in that, during that time also, I need to clear my immigration. So if I am not sound in my document while returning, so my own country may also stop or may create some problems. So as to avoid any such kind of issues, we need to see that to which country I am going and to which country I am residing, and the country I am residing, what are the requirements of that particular country also. So these are the basic tenets of legalized movement. So traveling with a valid travel document, motive with the related travel document of the movement. Why we are moving? We are moving just for being a tourist, or for education purpose, or for marital purpose, or after getting a job, or for going for higher studies. So the motive must be very clear, and obviously, as I have said earlier, it should not be illegal prima facie. Then the time period for which the travel document is valid. That is also a very, very important aspect, and why it is important, that would be understood in the later slides. But as of now, it is very important to understand that time period for which the visa is allowed is very important, because if you are overstaying the visa, then in most of the cases you turn to become an illegal immigrant, which in India also, if you overstay the visa for the time period for which your visa has been allowed, if you are coming here, then you can be termed as an illegal immigrant, and then very unlikely procedure may happen on you. So that should be avoided. Then moving from one place to another, where both the places are recognized by international community. That means both the places must be considered as nations. It's not that we are traveling to an unmanned island which is not recognized under international law as any international territory. So in that case, the travel document would be very vague, or rather, in most of the cases, one may end up not getting issued any travel document. Particular slide, I have tried to strike out the differences between visa and passport, because I know that although these two terms are very, very common and very, very general, and people may laugh that why anybody would be explaining to us that what is the difference between visa and passport. But at the same time, we need to understand that when we are studying immigration law, we need to basically be very clear that what is the objective of passport and what is the objective of visa, and what are the differences between these two instruments. Because many a times what happens is, when the terms become too general, we sometimes tend to use these terms as interchangeably, and we start taking it in that way that both of them are doing the same, serving the same purpose, but that is not the case. So basically, a visa is an official permission that a certain country needs to grant a passport holder of another country before their visit to the former country. A visa is a temporary authorization for a passport holder to travel to a country other than the one he or she holds a passport of. So basically, okay, let me complete the visa definition also. A passport definition is generally a legal document issued by a country to their citizen for the purpose of allowing them to travel across the boundaries after scrutinizing some requirements as the concerned authority deems fit. So basically, suppose I am an Indian. When I have become a major, and there are certain other criteria which is needed to be fulfilled if I have to apply for a passport, Indian passport. So now suppose I have applied for an Indian passport, and then I am in need of going to some other country. So when I want to go to US. So I need to go to the US embassy, and I need to take their permission that whether they will be allowing me to their country or not. So in spite of the fact that I have been issued an Indian passport from the Indian government, that is their permission to me, that I as an Indian citizen can go outside the country and can come back when my objective for going outside is fulfilled. But at the same time, the country to which I am traveling also need to sanction me the permission that they are allowing me to enter into their state. So that permission is visa. And so in the visa, the entire purpose becomes very specific, because there are various categories of visa like tourist visa, student visa, working visa. So there it becomes very clear that the purpose for which you are going to that particular country. So this is the basic difference between visa and passport. It does not mean that if you have visa, impromptu you get the authority to travel into the country. You need to if you have passport, you impromptu get the authority to travel into the foreign country, and without passport you can never get visa. So passport without visa is possible, because in that case if you have a passport, you are not traveling anywhere, you don't require any visa. But visa without passport is not possible, because if you are traveling anywhere, then only you require visa. And of course, if you require visa, that means you need to have passport to travel into a foreign country. So there are certain basic differences which I have highlighted here, and which I have already explained also. So that is the all which I have covered in this slide. Now, as I have said earlier also, because we are in India, we need to understand the Indian context of passport and the rules and regulation acts and other legal instruments which deals with passport. So the British Indian passport was the basic first passport when we were colonized. So we were British Indians. So the kind of passport, the travel document which used to be issued to us by the Queen was British Indian passport. Then in 1920 we had legislation which was basically solely dedicated for Indian citizens. Obviously, even at that time also we were British Indians, but for the purpose of India and for the purpose of Indians exclusively, this particular act was passed, and that legislation was named as Passport Entry into India Act 1920. But here chiefly immigration was dealt, emigration was not taken a part of it. So only people who are entering into India from some other country, they were covered under this act. Then we had Indian passport rules, because with every act there is an analogous rule which describes the requirements of certain travel documents or some other documents which are enclosed in definition of act. Then we had Passport Entry into India Rules 1950. The main Passport Act 1920 got amended. In 1950, some of the new inclusions were made. And then the first Passport Act after independence, post-independence, was Passport Act 1967. Then we had the rules, analogous rules of 1980. And then we have the amendment with regard to passport, because here we are dealing with immigration. We are not dealing with emigration. So here I have not included those legislation which deals with emigration in India. I have only included those legislation which deals exclusively with immigration in India. So then one of the recent amendment which has been made in this particular case of legislation was the 2000 amendment. But even in Passport Act, there have been many later amendments which have taken place. So in the course of study, obviously it will be clear to all of us. So as I said in the previous slide, that 1920 Passport Act was one of its own kind, first time Passport Act, which was dedicated for Indian perspective. So it was a British India passport. It used to issue travel documents to those who were subjects of British governed in India by birth or by naturalization. Both were the kind of the citizenship which were allowed under British India. And if they are going to Britain, and if they are going to United Kingdom or any other country, and they need to come back, so how they will be doing all this kind of traveling. So for that purpose, this particular act was enunciated. Here I have given the detailed analysis of the two acts, 1920 Act and 1967 Act, what was exclusively defined in 1920 Act and has not been defined in 1967 Act, and vice versa. So here we can see that the definition of the entry was defined primarily in 1920 Act. So it means entry by water, land or air. Through any source you are entering into India, you have to enter with a proper travel document. Departure was not defined because emigration was not covered, as I said earlier. So definition of passport as per the 1920 Act was a passport for the time being in force, issued or renewed by the prescribed authority and satisfying the condition prescribed relating to the class of passport to which it belongs. And prescribed means prescribed by rules made under this Act, means 1920 Act. However, the 1967 Act has taken the effort to define departure, because departure, although prima facie seems to be a part of immigration, but we cannot sever these two concepts completely. We cannot say that immigration is something else and immigration is something else. So they have to kept in two different distinct watertight chambers. That we can't say. They go hand in hand. They are intertwined human activities. So when we are defining entry, we should also define what is departure. So that effort has been taken in 1967 Act, and it has been defined under section 2A with its grammatical variation and cognate expression, means departure from India by water, land or air. Then definition of passport 2B, passport means a passport issued or deemed to have been issued under this act. And 3A includes a passport which having been issued by or under the authority of the government of foreign country satisfied the conditions under Passport Entry into India Act 1920. Okay, so it has written that those passport, that the passport definition has been kept constant, and even 1967 Act did not took an effort to redefine passport. It has said that whatever has been recognized as a passport under 1920 Act in India would be kept the same. So it will not be changed. Now here we can see that in the 1920 Act there were certain big flaws, because altogether the legislation was very early legislation. Firstly, it was a colonial time legislation. Secondly, so basically the legislation was adopted so as to fulfill very specific constricted objective. So it has many gaps, like it couldn't define, or it has not defined what is meant by passport authority. Who will be that passport authority? Who will be issuing that? There was a complete darkness in the legislation. Legislation does not mention any of that. Then travel document. What is meant by travel document? Like passport they have defined, but whether passport is the only travel document, or there can be some other document, or there are chances that some other document may also be called as a travel document. That was not strictly defined in 1920 Act. Then 1967 Act, there are certain things which have been defined. Passport authority was defined, travel document was defined. Okay, so these were the flaws which were there in 1920 Act and which have been coped up by the 1967 Act. Now, I said in the earlier slide only that there were certain big flaws or shortcomings, we can say, which were present in 1920 Act and which have been made good in the 1967 Act. But at the same time, law is a dynamic subject, so it changes as and when the society demands any change from the legal side. So obviously, this slide deals with some of the major changes which were there being done in the chronology with time. So I would not take much time, because it is clearly readable, and the different colors means different thing, like shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may be extended to 3 months, or with or without fine. So this was an inclusion which was made in by the 1967 Act, which was not there in the 1920 Act. Then the 2000 amendment also made it very clear that punishment should be increased. So the punishment was increased for a term of 3 months, which is a very minimum amount of imprisonment. It was made 5 years, and the fine was also enhanced. And these are some of the amendments which were very visible amendments or changes which has been made in the legislations. Now, this is one of the very important and interesting point, because as I have said that in normal conditions every person is compulsorily needed to travel with proper travel documents which are issued by the government, which are authorized and scrutinized and then issued to a particular person while the person thinks of traveling. But there can be certain exemption to any particular community or to any particular person or at any particular time, which may be allowed by a country to another country, or by a country to people of their own country, or people of the other country, some particular community of that country. It depends wholly on the will of their own, how they want to go with that. So they can, a particular state can come up with certain exemptions under certain conditions at certain times, where they will not be following the general rule which they have made for entry and exit. Okay, so this is one such situation when the Indian central government has decided that on humanitarian consideration, They wanted to exempt the Bangladeshi and Pakistani nationals belonging to minority community who have entered into India on or before 31st December 2014 from the relevant provisions of rules or order made under Passport Entry into India Act 1920 and Foreigners Act 1946 in respect of their entry and stay in India without such documents or after the expiry of those documents, as the case may be. The central government has accordingly issued 2 notifications. Okay. There are reports that a number of Bangladeshi and Pakistani nationals belonging to minority community in those countries such as Hindu, Sikh, Christian, Jain, Parsi and Buddhists were compelled to seek shelter in India due to religious persecution or fear of religious persecution. They have entered into India either without valid documents including passport or other travel document, or with valid documents but the validity of such documents have expired. Okay, so basically, as I have said earlier, that it is totally the will of the state to consider any such entry or exit, or not to consider any such entry or exit, depending upon the veracity of the reason, depending upon the sensitivity of the time during which the movement was done, or on the ground which the country seems very human ground or very sensitive ground where the violations were so steep in their country that they were forced to travel without proper travel documents. Either they were traveling and they have overstayed the document, or they were at all not traveling with travel documents, legal travel documents. So in that case, it totally depends upon the host state to take the decision. So one such decision I have exemplified here in context of India. But nevertheless are the practice questions. Of course, for after every presentation there can be some practice questions. So there are very simple practice questions which I have kept. What is meant by travel document? What is meant by passport and visa? What are the differences? And how the passport is interpreted under Indian legislation. So these can be some plausible practice questions which may come up after a certain discussion. There can be certain other in detail questions which also may crop up, but I have not exemplified here because they can become very exhaustive and there is no boundary in asking the question. So as and when we will discuss with a certain specific topic, we may ask those questions. So hope you have understood the entire concept of passport and its nexus with the concept of immigration. Thank you so much. Hope to see you people in the next video again. Thank you.